Well, hello everybody. Good morning to an early live today. So, what is the subject we're going to talk about today? Well, I thought I would talk a bit more about VAWA petitions, what's required, how you prepare them, what VAWA stands for, and how you can use it, which ultimately results in the green card. So note that you can put your questions here. Go ahead, no problem. And I will get to it as soon as I am done with my discussion on VAWA. I'll just scroll back up. I'll read what your questions are and I'll answer them. And, if you want a consultation, just contact me after. I have lots of different manners to do that. You can certainly just call the office, they'll schedule it, and we'll go from there. Okay, so what is a VAWA application? Okay, why do it? Well, a long time ago, President Biden came out with and spearheaded the legislation Violence Against Women Act. Okay, now keep in mind, even though that's the official title, I've prepared VAWAs for men as well. Okay, so if you're married to a U.S. citizen or lawful permanent resident and you're abused, okay, physically or emotionally, then you have the ability to file the VAWA in order to get the green card. Why would they put out a policy like this? Well, one of the main reasons is they don't want someone to stay in an abusive relationship just for the purposes of getting the green card. Because people are going to think, well, I've got to stay in this relationship and I've got to keep being abused, even though I don't want to be, because if not, I'm going to be deported. Okay, that's what would go through their minds. So the VAWA allows people to file this petition without the help of their spouse, without any assistance, without any signature, without any documents, nothing from the spouse in order to go forward. And I want to also have you keep in mind that this particular petition has a lower burden of proof than a lot of other petitions. And what does that mean? Okay, that means that in addition to you being able to file it, that compared to other types of petitions, you actually can file less, okay? Meaning that you can, the proof that you have to do is less than what would be required in other types of petitions. And that's good for you, okay? So given that, when you're doing the VAWA petition, because I get people all the time, they'll say, well, I didn't make a police report. Can I still file it? And the answer is yes. Okay. The reality is we know why you didn't make a police report, because you were afraid. You were afraid that you were going to get abused more. Okay. Or you're afraid the police were going to take you into custody, just fear. And so that's how that works. So what do you have to prepare in order to have a valid VAWA petition? Okay, well, first things first, as much as, the abuse might be, you have to prove the bona fides of the marriage in the first place. If there's not a bona fide marriage, then you're not going to, no matter how much the abuse, you're not going to get a VAWA approved. So first things first, when you're preparing, like when I prepare the attorney cover letter, of course, the first section is showing it's a bona fide marriage. Okay, how long ago did you meet? How long have you been living together? How is the relationship? Do you have joint bank accounts? All this other stuff. The bottom line is you have to look and you have to see that the marriage itself was entered into because of love, not because you wanted the green card. Okay, so, if, for example, you knew the person 3 days before you got married and you never lived together and you're 42 years apart in age, that's pretty much not a bona fide marriage, okay? I mean, theoretically, it could be love at first sight and all this, but, you have to prove first that it's a bona fide marriage. So let's say we get past that point, no problem. So then you have to show where the abuse was. So when I'm preparing the declaration, the supporting declaration for a VAWA petition, it is a very detailed declaration. And I understand that the person that was abused doesn't want to go into the detail, doesn't want to relive it. I understand that. But then I also understand that that person needs a green card, needs to get legal status. And it's necessary, okay? So they can certainly see a therapist and they can certainly get help in other respects. But when I do the declaration and prepare it, we need to have the details. So remember, with a VAWA, it can be either emotional or physical or both. Okay, and it doesn't have to be a lot of physical. There's nothing in the law that says you must be physically abused 5 times to apply. No, 1 time, 1 single time. That's what it'll take. Now, the emotional part of it, that's a little more difficult, okay, because normally it's not 1 time will satisfy, because you can't show severe emotional abuse with just 1 incident. So it's aggregating all of the different incidences that ultimately would lead to it. So normally when I do a petition for VAWA, it's a combination of both, okay? Although I can say that generally speaking, for the ones I do for the males, that's more emotional, okay? Emotional blackmail, things like that. And it can be quite severe, okay? So the declaration, of course, is a very important part of the VAWA, and you can't misrepresent, you can't lie, don't do any of that. But when I do it, I prepare it in a very coherent fashion that shows the bona fides of the marriage, and then what happened, when, how it happened, why it's abuse, and so forth. And that's that part. Now, the other part, remember when I said before that they could go to a therapist and get help? Well, usually I have someone who I'm doing a VAWA for go to the therapist to show the severe emotional abuse that happened, and to show the hardship that's occurring because of either the physical abuse or the emotional abuse, and to show maybe why a police report wasn't done, and what fear the person lived under, and how they're suffering. And then I get a detailed report from the therapist, whether it's a psychiatrist, psychologist, social worker, whatever it is, that will assist in the supplementing of showing the abuse, okay? And then, of course, I do the cover letter, okay, the attorney cover letter, where we go through step by step what the law is and how the abuse occurred and why it qualifies for VAWA, okay? And so it's a detailed way of showing what happens, why it happened, and then, of course, we have to get into why, for example, the person's not living together. Okay, now, either way, we have to show things. I've had cases where they still are living together because the person is afraid to leave, or the person can't leave, has nowhere to go. So they're living under the house of an abusive relationship. They have nowhere to go, and yet we are filing the VAWA without disclosing that to the spouse. Okay, it's doable. Okay, I've done it. It's doable. And so when we file it, by the way, the law says that if the spouse does find out and sends a super detailed declaration to immigration saying everything that they're saying is a lie, it didn't happen, blah, blah, blah. By law, the adjudicating officer can't refer to that, can't consider it, can't look at it, okay? So the law protects the person doing the VAWA application, okay? And obviously, if someone submits a fraudulent VAWA application, well, they'll call them on it and they'll send a request for evidence. Okay, so we have the whole package together. Now, the next question that has to be asked is the person inadmissible on any other grounds? Okay, if the person is inadmissible, VAWA doesn't by itself magically make that disappear. Okay, so we may need to file a waiver of inadmissibility with the VAWA. You know, were there crimes, is there fraud, misrepresentation, so forth. And then you have to look at the ground of inadmissibility and see if it is related to the abuse. Okay, was the crime committed because the person was running away from the abuse and had to do something? Was the person under duress from the person who was committing the abuse? You know, things like that. So those are definitely waivable if it's related. Okay, now what I always get a question of when I file the VAWA, they'll say, when can I get the work permit? Okay, well, the answer is you might or you might not, depending how we file. You can file the VAWA separately, by itself. That's it. Okay, now if you do that, you're not going to get the work permit right when you file the VAWA. You're only going to get the work permit after the VAWA is approved, and then you file the adjustment based on file the work permit with the adjustment. Okay, so then the issue comes, can you file the adjustment and the VAWA at the same time? And the answer is yes, you can. Now, sometimes I don't advise that. Sometimes I don't do that. Sometimes if the VAWA is a borderline VAWA, okay, meaning we're a little unsure if it's going to really go through or not. I mean, we're never 100% sure. And by the way, any immigration lawyer who says, I guarantee you success, well, you need to say goodbye, close it, and walk out the door. And by the same token, on the other side, any client who says, I will not retain you unless you guarantee success, you say, well, you're going to need to go to someone who's not a qualified immigration lawyer then. So, you know, the reality is that's why you need someone who knows what they're doing, because nobody can guarantee success. So if you can't guarantee the success, you have to go to someone who can put the best possible petition forward in order to try to get an approval. Okay, that's the bottom line. Okay, that's how it is. So if you file the VAWA and the adjustment at the same time, okay, then what happens is if the VAWA is denied, so will the adjustment. Now, the reason that I say sometimes I wouldn't file at the same time is you have to pay all the fees. Okay, you pay the attorney's fees, you pay the filing fees, you pay all that. And if the VAWA is denied, well, then you've just paid all the adjustment fees for attorneys, for filing, and, you know, it's not going to go forward. Now, if you have a decent case, and of course, if you need to work, and you need to have that work permit, you file the adjustment, the VAWA, the waivers if needed, you file it all at the same time. And if it's all approved, that's great. Okay, you get the VAWA approved, you get the adjustment approved, you get the waivers approved. Okay, and that's great. That's how it works. So that, in the bottom line nutshell, is how you prepare, submit the VAWA application. Definitely do not stay in the relationship if this is occurring. Leave, get out, and get the VAWA filed. I've done VAWA applications for women, for example, who are in shelters because they couldn't stay in their home and they had nowhere else to go. Okay, so it's doable wherever you happen to be. I've done VAWA for people who have escaped the relationship, left the country, and now are contacting me, how can I come back? Okay, so it can be filed, you know, even if you've left the country. So there's ways of doing it. All right. So that's that. Now let me go through here. I know it's early in the morning, so I suspect a lot of people are not up yet. At least, in this part of the world. However, if you're in another part of the world watching, obviously could be the middle of the day. So in that case, hope everybody's enjoying their morning, afternoon, or night, wherever you happen to be. All right, let me just answer a couple questions here, and then we'll call it on the live. I'm actually doing this one before I begin work. So let's see. So I have someone who says, hello, beautiful people around the world. Well, hello to you too, Cilantro. I appreciate the sentiment. It's nice to get up and say hello to everybody. Okay, here's one. I've been an immigration paralegal for 9 years. I love my job and line of work. I'm glad to hear that. Immigration law is very rewarding. It can also be very distressing because it affects people's lives, right? And it's not like a civil job where you're doing a deposition. If you lose, they get a money judgment and then they have to pay money. I can tell you that when I was beginning law a long time ago, over 30 years ago, what I got was an insurance defense job. Oh my God, I hated it. Depositions and interrogatories and judgments, and even after you won, the client, half the time the client was just a company anyway, so they didn't really care. They just got a check and so forth, and no real satisfaction. But I decided at that point to become an immigration attorney, and there was a transition. But yes, it is very rewarding. You have people, their lives are changed by what you do. And a lot of times it's changed for the better. People who are going to be kicked out of the country get to stay here. People who just want to move on with their lives. And you prepare what needs to be done in order for them to ultimately get legal status and move on. And they're very, very thankful. So I'm glad you are enjoying your paralegal work. Keep at it. Good job. All right. Let's see what else we have. Is it possible to file asylum at USCIS if asylum case was already dismissed the court 2 years before? Absolutely not. No way. Okay. What you're trying to do is get 2 shots at the apple, even though it was already denied. Now, first of all, if the asylum was somehow in court, that means you were in court, in immigration court proceedings. Otherwise, it would have been filed at USCIS in the first place. Or it was already filed at USCIS, denied, and it went up to court, okay, and the court dismissed it. Either way, the court retains jurisdiction of the asylum right now, and you wouldn't just turn around and file at USCIS, especially because if it was dismissed by the court and you happen to be here, you might have a removal order. Okay, you may. And you try filing a new asylum case at USCIS, they might call, say, sure, come on in for an interview. And the next thing you know, you're in detention. And the next thing you know after that is you're being deported. So you don't want to play games like that. We would need to find why it was dismissed at the court. Was it dismissed because you filed after a year and you couldn't get past the 1 year issue? Was it dismissed because they didn't believe you and found you not credible? Was it dismissed because they didn't believe that you fell under one of the grounds of asylum, social group, political, religious, race, whatever? So I would get a copy of the FOIA. I'd review the immigration court file. I'd find why it was dismissed and see if there's a way to do a motion to reopen to get back into court to see if it was improperly dismissed or maybe there's new evidence. I would also find if there's another way to help you other than asylum. There might be, okay? People sometimes think there's only one way to come in because that's what they've heard, and they don't realize there's, 62 different ways to obtain legal status here. Hence the reason for a consultation from an immigration attorney who knows what they're doing, okay? All right. VAWA case pending. File for renewal of work permit in March. Still no receipt. Is that normal? Okay, well, first of all, if you filed, as I was saying, if you filed for the work permit renewal, that means you must have filed the VAWA and the adjustment at the same time. Okay, you have to have a receipt. The receipt is usually within 45 days. So I don't know on what basis you're filing for a work permit, because if it's filing a work permit based on the VAWA, you would definitely have a receipt from the VAWA and the adjustment, which leads me to believe you have a work permit based on something other than VAWA, and it also makes me believe that the VAWA wasn't properly filed, assuming more than 45 days has passed. So you don't want to be in a position where you are waiting month after month after month, only to finally go to an attorney and say, look, this wasn't filed right. Okay, and then you have to start over. So you got to take care of business now. Find out what's going on, why it properly wasn't done, because they don't just not send receipts for a VAWA, especially for a VAWA application. Okay, so find out what's going on. Don't just wait. Okay, so I think that's going to do it for the. I was going to say, I think that's going to do it for the VAWA today. That's going to do it for the live this morning. It was early. I think the sun's just starting to come up. So I usually do lives once or twice a week. Sometimes I do it most of the time I do it in the afternoon. I tried this morning, because I wanted to get it done before I actually began my job. Just like we have one more question. Let me answer one more question, and then we'll call it. Sir, I filed a VAWA January 2024. I got a combo card, but didn't get prima facie. Is it normal with pending asylum? Well, you're asking a multiple different questions here. If you didn't get a prima facie determination of the VAWA, and you receive something else, that means they don't believe the VAWA was sufficient to start. Okay, which is why you have to prepare it properly in the first place, because if you just don't submit any sufficient evidence at all to show why the VAWA was a VAWA, that's going to be a big problem. So in that case, if I was reviewing it, I would say, yeah, I can see why they didn't send you a prima facie determination, and I would then supplement the declarations, the affidavits. I'd put in a much stronger attorney cover letter to show why VAWA existed. And then I'd look at the asylum. You obviously have a pending asylum, so I'd need to see how valid that is, and if it's strong. Okay, same thing. Okay, some people think that because they file it, that's all it takes, and that's not the case. Okay, when you file something, that by no definition available in the human language means it'll be approved, for sure. Okay, filing is the first step, but it's an important step to make sure it's filed as strong as it could be. The adjudications officer gets nothing more or less from denying or approving. Their job is to review it, to see if it meets the qualifications, and to deny, approve, or send an RFE, a request for evidence. So I'm strongly suspecting your case needs to be supplemented to make it stronger. Okay? All right. I keep saying I'm going to leave, but questions keep coming in, so I want to answer them before I go. Hey, I filed my VAWA in March. I did my biometrics on June. How long does it take to get a work permit? Well, again, it depends if you filed the VAWA and the adjustment at the same time. Filing just VAWA by itself does not mean you get a work permit. For sure. You do not get a work permit based solely on the VAWA. You have to file the VAWA and the work permit. Okay? The VAWA and the adjustment in order to get the work permit. The work permit is based on the pending adjustment of status. The adjustment of status is based on the pending VAWA. Okay? So I got to file both at the same time. Okay. VAWA 485, fingerprints were taken. How long does it take VAWA to be approved? VAWA is not automatically approved. You can't think because you just filed it, it's going to be approved. Okay, that's the issue here. Your question should really be, how long does it take the VAWA to be adjudicated, for them to rule on it? Okay. Unfortunately, I have a lot of people who contact me. They say, I've done research on the internet. I know what it takes to do a VAWA. I've done it. I just want to ask a couple follow-up questions. And the answer is they don't. Okay? They really don't. They might have gone to ChatGPT and said, describe a VAWA, what's needed, and let me know how I can prepare it to get an approval. And that's fine. They certainly have more knowledge of it than they did before they went on the internet. But don't fool yourself. Don't think that just because you went on the internet and you see 5 different items of what's needed and you think you prepared all 5 of those items, that you are in and it's easy peasy. Nothing is easy at immigration. Zero. Okay? Zero. Everything is difficult at immigration. Everything is difficult to get approved. Everything is an uphill battle. You have to keep that in mind. Okay? They being the government, is not inclined to easily grant anything. That's just a fact. Okay? I got used to this when I started immigration many, many years ago. It's always an uphill battle. It's always fighting, which is fine. That's what I do. I'm a lawyer. But you have to understand, as the person who's actually applying, you have to understand that they are not there to just approve what you file, okay? They are there to adjudicate what you file. So that's why it has to be made really strongly, okay? So given that, how long does it take to adjudicate? Well, once it's filed, you're looking at about a year, okay? Sometimes less, sometimes more. It depends what jurisdiction you're in. Obviously, if you file in Los Angeles, it'll take longer than if you file in Missouri, okay? Bottom line, I mean, that seems clear, right? Okay, but again, don't make when it is adjudicated your number one concern. Make the petition itself being as strong as possible your number one concern. What is the use of getting it adjudicated if it just gets denied, right? I mean, what's the use? So you want to try to get it approved. Okay. How long will it take for OPLA to respond after submitting a PD in New York City? Well, okay, that's a prosecutorial discretion, and that depends. It depends why you're asking for prosecutorial discretion. It depends exactly on what basis, where you are in your case, what the facts are, and so forth, okay? Obviously, if the matter were to be in court next week and you've just submitted the application and something big has happened that may give them the authority, or they find if they approve it, they won't have to prepare for trial, they might be more inclined to do it than otherwise. So it just depends. Okay. U.S. citizen marrying a J1 while they're working, can we change the J1 into something else? That all depends. Okay. It depends primarily if the J1 is subject to the 2-year foreign residency requirement. Okay, which meaning that the J1, when they come here, they have to leave for 2 years, go back to their home country normally, and do whatever they do before they can come back. So if they're not subject to the 2-year foreign residency requirement, I mean, I see you're saying here they're a doctor from Canada, which means they are very much likely subject to the 2-year foreign residency requirement, especially being a doctor. And it doesn't matter, they're from Canada, wherever they are, and I can almost guarantee you they got U.S. funding to do the J1 here, to do whatever they're doing. There are J waivers, okay? Waivers for doctors, so they would have to do a J waiver, get that approved, and then they can do the adjustment to the U.S. citizen. Okay, that's all doable, but not just flat out doing a J1. And how often do they get approved? Well, that depends on the case. Okay, if you have 100 people who don't know what they're doing try to do a J waiver on their own, you're probably going to get 99 of them denied. If you have qualified, experienced immigration attorneys doing the J1, then, well, the percentage goes way up. Okay, so you can't just look at a percentage and say. You have to look who's doing it, how experienced they are, and so forth. It's the bottom line. Yeah, okay, you're welcome. Okay, so that's that. It's a good time to stop because I just got 1,000 likes, right? 1,000 hearts. So, it's a nice even number. So everybody have a good day. Enjoy the rest of your day. Go out there and, look at the sun and the beautiful sky and so forth. And have a good day at work. All right. Signing.